Welcome, Val. Welcome, Chitra. So before
Good to
we
meet you,
start,
Aruneesh.
let's
Good to meet you,
quickly have like maybe a minute or two of your respective introductions.
Yeah, I'll start with mine. I'm Chitra Dharmarajan. I'm leading security engineering at Okta. I started my career more as a developer, living in Silicon Valley, slowly evolved into security engineering. So I have been on both sides of the table, both on as a developer on the other side of the table, as well as a security practitioner telling the developers to fix issues. So I've seen both sides of the table.
Thanks for joining. And Val.
Excellent. Hi, I'm Valmiki Mukherjee. I'm the chairman and founder of 𝗦𝗽𝗲 Foundation and also CEO of 𝗦𝗽𝗲, which is a product portfolio management that we have, silently launching. And the career in cybersecurity, 20 odd years now. Have been with Deloitte and Cognizant. Most recently, I led security infrastructure and critical infrastructure security at EY, the global security business for them, and joined our friends, that you very well know, into the entrepreneurial journey. So happy to be here. Product security and AppSec is one of my favorite areas, and I'm really glad what Purple Book community is doing, and happy to support the journey.
Plus one on that.
Thanks, Val, for joining again. So before we start on, we have a long list of questions that we have, but for everybody who's joining us on LinkedIn, it's important to realize, when we talk about right-siding any maturity model, not just security, but it's important to realize that it actually has maybe 5 or 6 different steps, right? First of all is determining your organization goals and specific needs. Then selecting a maturity model that works for organization of your size and your vertical. Identify the maturity level that are relevant and practical for your respective organization, customize the maturity model and implement the maturity model. And last but not the least, like everything else, you have to continuously improve. So going back to the list of questions that we have, so I'll likely do a round robin between Chitra, you and Val. So you can take turns, right? Chitra, I'll start with you. So first one, how essential is to have an executive buy-in for your AppSec program for your organization?
So I'll say we all know that security is everyone's responsibility, not just security team's responsibility. That kind of promotes our evolution into a shared responsibility model. And in shared responsibility model, executive buy-in is primary, but also I'm not just going to stop with only executive buy-in. We also need to have a strong alignment with stakeholders and our own security teams. So executive buy-in brings in a lot of value because they have a larger perspective of customer base, compliance landscape to which the business has to adhere to, and what is the risk tolerance for the business risk. So they bring in that unique perspective, which will help us determine the strategy and goal to drive the program to success. And of course, executives definitely have the wallet string, so they definitely fund and resource the programs, which is very imperative for a very successful AppSec program. But beyond just budgeting and resourcing, it's their knowledge and their customer insight, which will drive the right strategy, which is right size to that organization. So resourcing is only one part of the value with executive buy-in, but the larger part of the value is a strategic guardrails, which we can place with their assistance. That will be very helpful. But once we get the executive buy-in, it's more about our stakeholders. So stakeholders are contributors in security milestones. So if we have an executive buy-in, but stakeholders have a lot of priorities and concerns, which is just not being addressed at the right time, and they are not delivering the security milestones, then the program is not going anywhere. So stakeholder alignment is very imperative to move the needle from one end to another. And last but not the least is our own security teams buy-in for constant changes and detours that we make, because we all know that security is not a very prescriptive role. Time to time, we evolve and adapt to changes, threat landscapes. So I'll say 3-pronged buy-in.
Thank you. And well, I'm pretty sure you're eagerly waiting.
Absolutely. And I'm glad that Chitra, you started with the executive buy-in, because I think that is one of the hardest part, because the business needs to understand what they're building and what they're selling and how it needs to be secure. In fact, I'll put the hat, the chief security officer hat on, and I'll tell you that we are doubling down not only on the security side but also at the evolving trust side, because the business, if you have been tracking all of these days, we've been talking about zero trust and the zero trust architecture. But we started in our security journey 20 years back with trust but validate. So between those, I think the business is a little bit lost, right? What to do? Should we trust? We don't trust. And if you see some of the most seasoned security professionals, they have actually taken on the chief trust officer hat, right? Which is basically three-pronged. One is enterprise risk management. Second is compliance and governance, not the traditional GRC under cyber, but compliance and governance with legal and risk management involved. And the third would be cybersecurity and resilience, right? So if you tie all of these, that's what provides the level of trust for the end customers to use your product. And I think that relates very much to how businesses actually go about. So whether you're a product company or you are a consumer retail company, doesn't matter. How your consumers and end users trust what you have, because nobody is immune to breach, and that the risk is out there. So how we build a company and how we build the products reflects that. And I think that's our opportunity, is to ensure that there's executive buy-in and they understand in their language how they would, how our journey for securing the product comes, right?
Very relevant. So moving on to the next question. Well, I'll start with you. Again, let's focus on decision makers for respective organizations. Who in your experience are the decision makers for right-sizing your much-needed maturity model and the associated costs?
So again, I think I think in terms of threes, I'm sure there's more and less to that, but there is business, there is end customer, okay, and then there is the security function. I would say more of a risk function that's there, right? So it's not necessarily just security's job, and I think Chitra alluded to it very nicely, that it's actually the organization's job. When it's organization, it's an entire organization, including the staff who are building products, but also the ones that are taking the product to the market. So I think in terms of I will just use the framework that I'm using right now at one of the Ps I'm working for, is that you need to have a very comprehensive stakeholder group that is just not limited to security, and it includes the chief risk officer, the people officer, the general counsel, and where we have the other functions, CFO, CIO, of course, included. So it needs to be the C-suite, and everyone needs to be involved in making sure that the structure, the framework, the strategy that we build, that there is a buy-in, and that's one of a model of success than security building it and waiting for others to use, right? The buy-in has to happen when we're building it, and I think that's where I have seen the most success, whether it's a Fortune 50 company I work for, or a technology company that's growing fast.
So maybe, Chitra, let's actually jump to maybe the next question itself. So do you think like the size of the organization is an element to determine the security maturity level that you want to aim for?
I wouldn't say the size of the organization determines whether we want to reach level 3 maturity or level 5 maturity, but size of the organization defines the journey. How do we reach the respective level, which is where our risk tolerance ceilings are hit. For example, if you are a very small sized company and you have very few hands on the keyboard, would you want to build your own secure development training curriculum and training team, or would you want to procure something commercially off the shelf so that you can train your audience in a quick turnaround time? So it's more like a build versus buy strategy. Or do you have enough bandwidth to build your own internal penetration testing capability, or do you want to go outsource it with a continuous penetration testing offering available in the market? These are the tactical decisions that you make. So what maturity level that you need to reach as an organization is determined by your compliance landscape that you need to cater to and your customer base. So you cannot reduce on the quality of the maturity level that we need to reach. Just because you're a small organization, mid-sized organization, or big-sized organization, doesn't matter. Like Val said, it's a trust that your customer, you have to earn the trust of the customer. What do you need to do to earn the trust of the customer? But to reach that maturity level, am I going with build versus buy, or am I going with in-house versus outsourced? So, or am I going with a hybrid model? So those are the levels of decisions that we make as security leaders, depending on the size of the organization and the resourcing situations that we undergo.
And I think one more question's kind of relevant around this one, since you have been a core member of PBC from the get-go and critical part of the maturity model that we are building together, right? Could you share your views of the proposed PBC's model itself, and how does it actually compare against the existing model that we have?
So there are a bunch of existing models which we all rely upon. Like NIST cybersecurity framework is very wholesome. And we also have specific to AppSec models like OWASP-SAM or BSIM from BSIM models. And we also have ISOs and IEC regulations. We all pull a leaf or a node from one of these models so that we custom tailor our security program in a comprehensive way. But there is one thing we are all at an inflection point today. Like so a decade ago, when we built our software services, we built these services in a monolithic architecture, probably single programming tech stack, living in a server in our data center, right? Whereas today, the way we build our software services have completely evolved. Like we are kind of like moving towards distributed architecture, piecing them into microservices, packaging them as a container, orchestrated by Kubernetes, deployed in a multi-cloud infrastructure. So the way our systems has evolved, it's a complex software solutions these days. So complexity is definitely not a great friend for security. So our security maturity models should also evolve with our tech stack and the way we build our software today. So I'm not going to say we have to reinvent the wheel, but we are definitely at an inflection point to see, do we need to change the diameter of this wheel, or do we need to add more spokes to this wheel? So maybe we need to bring in new domains in a security maturity model. So those are the areas which are being addressed by scalable software security maturity model, which is being built by 𝗵𝗵_book_club. So I don't want to give away too many insights about our MVP release, which is kind of like in the near horizon. But I'm so excited that this model is built by security practitioners who are implementing security engineering programs in our respective organizations. So this will be more viable to the current scenario of complex software systems, which we are working harder to harden.
Excellent. So I know we are at time, but any final words, any final thoughts from each one of you before we wrap up this one and go to the next one?
So I think Chitra well articulated the teaser, I would say, to the maturity model. But whenever you talk about maturity model, I always think about Carnegie maturity model, how CMM is how it's stuck to your mind, right? Hopefully, the structure and what we are building here, it becomes that relevant to everyday job of an engineer who's building a product or whether it's application or a physical product or IoT device. And I think this is our opportunity to transform that and become that rubric on which engineers are going to build secure products, and it's built into that, and it's very easy to relate. I know we can talk about any standards. I can nerd out on any standard, but I believe as we get the maturity models put together, they can choose and reflect upon what would be meaningful for them. So I'll leave it there.
Yeah, my takeaway from this conversation is we are evolving our technologies, our models have to evolve, and not just that, how we measure our adherence to these models should also evolve. We need to think about more automated way of measurements rather than manually measuring across a spreadsheet. That's another area where we need to evolve as an industry.
All right. Thank you. Well, thank you, Chitra, for your wonderful insights.